So please take a seat. We're going to start again in a second with our second panel. Could we test the mics of the speakers?
Hello.
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 Wonderful.
Yes, can you hear us?
Everything works. So we're going to start again, also because we have online participants that are joining the conversation. So for all of you, welcome back to the second panel. I mean, welcome back to the forum. And this is the second panel. And for our online listeners, welcome. As you know, we have captioning proposed in the room and online. We know it is imperfect. So if it is distracting you, just don't look at it. We will make sure that these live captions, these captions will be, of course, corrected when we propose this online afterwards. So again, just a quick introduction from me. I'm Johan Flock, the Director of Operation at On The Move, for all the people joining online. And for visually impaired, I am a white man in my mid-40s, wearing a grey jumper. I have brown greying hair and facial hair. I will, of course, ask my great moderator and our two fantastic panelists to do a similar exercise in a few seconds. So for this second panel discussion, I'm very happy that we will build upon many ideas and suggestions that were thrown out at us by the previous panelist Tamara and Wafa, and our moderator, Milica. This second panel is entitled Valuing International Cultural Collaboration. And I guess this is quite relevant after the first conversation to delve into value-driven training programs, coaching programs, international development programs. The idea for the second panel is really to revisit the motivations and needs of cultural stakeholders and try to open new avenues to investigate how we value the international collaboration, but also how do we value the international as, you know, a concept, a reality, as we touched upon already. The international is sometimes and quite often at home. To moderate this panel discussion, we have with us Anna Galas, who has been, who was a great president of On The Move back in the days, and I had the chance to collaborate with Anna for many years. Anna is a curator, a researcher. She's currently working for the Warsaw Observatory of Culture, which is a quite recent organization that is developing residency programs, but also research projects, and will be coordinating the ICON program for displaced artists. Anna has a huge experience as a curator. Also, she has been co-curating the Warsaw Biennale, and have been hosting both many international artists in Poland, and I have also been hosting many key conversations about international practices. So Anna, I will give you the floor and let you...
Thank you very much, Johan. Thank you for this introduction. Firstly, I would like to welcome everybody who stayed with us after the first panel, and those who joined us online as well right now. So my name is Anna Galas-Kosil. I'm from Poland. I'm woman in my early 40s. I'm a medium high, and I have dyed hair till medium length. And I'm wearing a skirt, a dark blue skirt, and long sleeve, white and red. I'm going to talk today with my wonderful guest, wonderful women, Sarah Philp and Laura Ganza. We're gonna, I think, continue actually the conversation that we already started before the break. And I'm also happy that some of the ideas that appeared during the first panel, I think we're gonna develop, maybe we're gonna dive a bit deeper into it, or give it, or look at it from different angle. And of course, we will start together the discussion, but later, of course, the floor will be open to everyone that would like to comment and ask questions. So first, I will introduce my guests. Laura is a program manager at Africalia. It's an organization that operates from Belgium, but actually has got and works in a much broader context of African countries and African continent. It's focused on decolonization and inclusion in the Belgian cultural sector by promoting a qualitative representation of African and Afro-descent artists and arts in Belgium, as well as you advocating for the decolonialization of culture sector. And Sarah is a deputy director of Delfina Foundation, the largest international visual arts residency program in the UK, where she focused on partnership, future strategy, and fundraising. And in the past, Sarah, you was a director, a program of Policy and Art Fund, where you led the development of and delivery of the charity grant programs. And I'm Anna Galas-Kosil. Again, I work at my daily work at Warsaw Observatory of Culture, which is the institution that is trying to combine research, academics with artists and artistic activities. And we also operate in the topic of migration and migrant and curators and artists with migrant experience living in Warsaw right now. So I think that we will have some of the common ideas of the value of international mobility in and outside the countries. And I would like to start with asking you and to look a little bit deeper into the models of your of the organization that you work for or you're running, because I found out interesting similarities. So Laura, your NGO based in Brussels is actually focused on building partnership, and international collaboration is within the mindset of Africalia, and you develop partnership within institution, you fund residency programs, you organize networking trips and different kind of tools for professional development. And Sarah, in your case, the Delfina Foundation is supporting international dialogue within their artistic practices, facilitate exchange, but you also look into experimental models, yes, and building relation in unexpected sometimes and new contexts. So I linked this issue of and the ideas of decolonization of culture sector with unexpected contexts working on, and I would like to ask you both about these models in which you operate, that you introduce a little bit more how the professional development of artists and culture sector is present within this model that your both organizations are developing.
Should I start? Yeah. Okay. I will first describe myself. So I am a black woman. I have a short afro with black hair, and I am dressed all in black. Not that I'm saying it out loud, it's a lot of black in my description. Yeah, you described a bit what I do at Africalia. And you focused on the Belgian program. That's a program that's focused on decolonization, and especially the decolonization of the Belgian cultural sector. But it is really a program that comes in support of the broader and actually the majority of our work that we do on the African continent, which is, these are programs that are focused on the professionalization of our partners in the different countries that we work with, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa, with this idea of strengthening their cultural ecosystems in their countries as a way to not always look to the global north. I think when it was Wafa earlier who was talking about finding solutions in our countries, lobbying towards our governments from the African continent, and that is really something that we try to support through those structural funding that we send to those partners, with this idea that for a period of time they maybe do not have to think about how to pay their employees and pay for the rent, and they can focus on developing a more robust system of diffusion, of production of material, of generating revenues at the end of the day, but where they can also focus a bit more maybe on advocacy towards their own government for supporting their sectors. And part of strengthening their capacity for generating revenues, part of this work of professionalization of our partner also goes through connecting them with other cultural actors who are working in the same framework as them, who are working in the same ways as them, or in ways that can inspire them, not always in Europe, but also in their neighboring countries, also in further countries, maybe in Africa, that they might not think because of those language barriers, for example, that they have something to connect on. But where we see from here, from working with all those different ecosystems, oh, but this partner in Mali is doing something that's very similar to our partner in Uganda, and they haven't connected, and we can connect them. We can offer this network. We can make sure that when they go to Mali to learn about how they are making their institution work, that they don't only see that one institution, but that they see all the partners and all the network that we have created in that country, and that they can bring that back. They can bring that back in their own country and then share that knowledge, which is something that we find very important, and that is one of the criteria when we are looking for partners as well, is do you have this capacity to then share the knowledge that we have made possible for you to gain? Are you going to diffuse it in the rest of the country? I'm thinking of our partner in Kenya, Creatives Garage, who, just as the name says, it is like really a garage of creative people that does everything from sound, music, to video, to podcasting, but who has also now developed a masterclass program. After now, I think it's our 7th or 8th year of working with them, that they're like, okay, we are at a stage in our development where we feel that we can also share this knowledge. And with this masterclass, the goal is, yes, to create a more professionalized ecosystem in Kenya, but also to not be the only one, to have other people that they can exchange with, and that they can support each other and be able to do advocacy towards the government and say, hey, look, we are creating work, we are creating jobs, we are developing economically this region, but we are also, like, creativity is more than just making money, it's also creating spaces for the youth to imagine new futures, and we are making this country more and more visible on the international scene, so maybe you as a government should support us a bit more. And that is something that we can see that our partners, by traveling to other countries and seeing like, oh, this partner in Zimbabwe, where there is a shrinking civic space, has been able to do advocacy. How can I learn from him? And how can I do that in my country?
Thank you. Sarah?
Hi. So I'll describe myself. I am a white woman in my 40s, which continues to surprise me. I've got short brown hair. I'm growing out a pixie cut, and it's very painful. And I'm wearing glasses, and I've got a grey and black check jacket and a white and black stripy t-shirt And I just sort of like to start by saying that I've been working at Delfina since the summer, and before that I always worked in a UK-only context, so it's a real privilege to be here and to learn from so many wonderful colleagues who've been working internationally for so much longer than I have. So at Delfina, international collaboration is kind of operating in slightly different ways at every single level of our organisation. So it's part of our founding values. We were founded to provide residency space in London for artists from the Middle East, and that very quickly grew to artists from all over the world. So far, we've worked with artists from 93 countries, 70% of those in the global south and in diaspora communities. So it's really, baked into kind of who we are. It works in terms of our funding model. We raise all our own money, and our funding partners come from all over the world and help to support artists and curators from all over the world to come to our residency space in London. It's absolutely critical to the residency programme itself. So we have space for 8 artists, and we work with about 40 in total every year who come and stay in London with us. And those 8 artists at any one time, it's very rare that they would come from the same countries. So we've normally got 8 artists from different countries, from different regions at the same time, and they live together. And there is a group program of visits and workshops, as well as individual programs for individual personal development. And it's also a research-based residency, so there's no expectation that artists will produce anything, will make anything. They can, of course, if they want to, and we'll facilitate that. But it's more about providing space and time to think, to connect, to discuss, and to experiment and collaborate. So we find, and our funders quite often also kind of are interested in, bringing people together, sort of very peer-led support, peer-led learning, peer-led kind of action research framework, which we facilitate to some degree, but which they facilitate for each other, I think, a lot more. And then those networks, those relationships that they've made, both with each other and kind of more widely in London, those get taken back. And we kind of have an ambition, and our funders often have an ambition that experience will help strengthen ecosystems locally, but also we end up creating connections that kind of bypass London and bypass kind of a sort of global north or kind of Western art world completely. So currently we've got a curator from Bolivia and an artist from Taiwan, and they have forged a kind of really great research connection, and they're going to be working together. Mm-hmm. And that's a kind of really extraordinary privilege to be able to help kind of generate that. And I think that we are able to do it because of the way we kind of think about bringing that group together, but also because that group lives together. And so we always start from the position that, yes, it's a residency, yes, there's professional development of different kinds, but actually it's just also a home. And so we try and create an atmosphere that makes that makes people feel safe, and that creates the conditions for that sort of creative space.
Yeah, I will start maybe, or I will continue a little bit the idea that already appeared in the first panel, that it seems also for me personally very interesting. So the topic of the development of actually the international collaboration that we can establish or develop next to us. So the communities that are living and operating next to us, and sometimes how to open and create a common table in which we can sit together, because often these communities are also living in a kind of bubble, so they are, I will maybe give an example of the Polish context, because Poland was for many years quite homogeneous country, and with the changes that we are facing from last few years, when many Ukrainian and especially Ukrainian and Belarusian artistic communities came to Poland, and they are trying to do their things, operate, but they are also looking for these connections. And we are trying to learn how to make this connection and how to create a space where all these people can, Polish artists and foreign artists but living in Warsaw or in Poland, can live and work together, and how they can know each other. Because we are also in in the practice of my organization, we also realized that often it's quite hard actually to explain how we work, like how Polish artists and Polish curators, what kind of working culture that they have, and what is the working culture of people that are coming in, you know, that are next to us. So that's why I would like to ask you as well, because I know Africalia is also dealing with the issue of diasporas and communities living in Belgium, but also having their own practices, sometimes their own groups or their own way of working. So how this exchange is working, or do you have, you know, maybe any tips?
Yeah, I think the context of Belgium is quite different from Poland, because Brussels likes to pride itself for being the most diverse city in the EU in terms of languages that are spoken. And we tend to live next to each other. We are not, Brussels is not a very divided city. You will see communities, but very easily you cross the street and then you will be in a very different neighborhood. And this migration didn't start like now. It has been going on through different ways, through links with colonization, but also work migration that were organized by the states for now maybe 100 years that we've been having these communities in Belgium. So they've developed their own, as you said, cultural practices, but also their own institutions, their own organizations. The challenge that we see now, and that has been occupying a lot of the work of Africalia in Belgium, is really this question of how do we make sure that there is a space in the mainstream cultural sector for those organizations, that they don't stay in the margin in terms of funding, but also in terms of recognition of the quality of their work. And yeah, as you said, we need to create a new table, maybe not add chairs to this table, but create a new table that is welcoming of the idea of, oh, maybe they don't work for the Royal Theatre of Brussels, but maybe they do have actually a very high level of expertise in what they're doing, and maybe we need to learn from them. And that is something that has been quite difficult for a lot of cultural institutions, especially in a political context where the funding for the arts are not going up, and we have European but also federal and regional elections coming in June in Belgium, and it is not looking good. So there is a real question of competition between those places who do not want to see a new organization popping up and who would rather have those people come into their own organization. And I think that there is a discussion for that, and there is also a real debate around why are those institutions in the middle of Brussels, surrounded by a lot of diversity, why do we not see this diversity in the people who work in those organizations and the people who are on stage in those organizations? But also, why do we need to have everyone working there? Maybe we can allow and support those organizations who are saying, we've been the Moroccan Center for Culture in Brussels for 50 years, and we are not interested in merging with another organization. We are interested in you coming and seeing what we do, and learning from our practices, and doing collaborations, and maybe sharing the resources. And yep, it is a hard step. I do not have any tips or tricks to give you, but I have a friend who worked at the Kai Theater in the center of Brussels, who often says, oh, when we talk about this difficulty to bring the diversity of Brussels inside the theater, just go see what they do. She's a programmer, and she says, I just go and see what they're doing. And I go see their shows, and I go work with them and talk with them and create and build those relationships with those communities. And then, yeah, it makes sense then to fit them into my programmation because I know what they are doing, and they know that they are welcome to come propose a show here or to do a collaboration with us. And I do think it has to come from those more mainstream institutions to do this step of, okay, maybe I will get criticized and maybe I will be called a lot of names that I maybe don't think that I deserve, but maybe also this is an opportunity for me to learn from those communities who did not discover the word decolonize in 2020, but who have been practicing these for as long as they've existed. So I would say, yeah, go outside your buildings and see what's around us.
Sarah, and what do you think? How to create these conditions that might help this kind of collaboration, exchange as well?
Yeah.
And because of this meeting, yes, because to establish the relation, people need to meet and see each other, and how to build good conditions for that.
It's kind of locally with,
Yeah.
So something that I'm thinking about a lot, and on the one hand, so at Delfina, our London and the kind of the contemporary visual art scene in London is very international. And so our kind of principal audiences, we have a small gallery space, we do some public programming, our kind of principal audiences for that are other artists and art students, and and they all live in London, and it's a very international and kind of diverse group of people that quite often mirrors the artists that we have. One of the limitations, and so we're in this nice little kind of bubble. And one of the limitations that we have, I think that we're all conscious of, is that the residency is an English language residency. I know we've been talking about language a little bit earlier, and so straight away we're into the realms of kind of the international contemporary art world. And then the kind of other limitation that we have is, because we're a residency space, because of kind of what we do, because of the artists that we have, we and the audiences that we get, we are talking to each other. And having come in my previous role from an organisation that worked with museums and art galleries in the UK, where all the focus is on audiences, like I would say to the detriment of the artists quite often, but it's quite strange for me not to be sort of thinking about kind of outreach and community work in quite the same way. But one of the things that we are thinking about is how we play to our strengths, I think. And I think this is, something that we all need to think about, particularly as in the UK context, particularly as funding is cut. What are we good at? And at Delfina, what we are good at is supporting artists at kind of quite relatively early stages of their careers. The relationships that we have kind of with local communities, which are strongest, are with art schools and art students. But then there are 2 state secondary schools around the corner from us, both of which offer arts at kind of A level, which is, if you don't know, is like 16 to 18. So and those are the local communities I think we should be talking to, because, and those are the communities we kind of are planning to talk to, because that makes sense for us in terms of our role in this kind of the talent pipeline in the visual arts. So, those communities, those young people are a diverse group of young people, which is reflected in the artists that we have. So it makes sense in kind of lots of ways. So for us, and I can really only speak for us, we're a small organisation. We've really got to play to our strengths. So yeah.
So maybe I will. Hello? Yeah. I hear you. Yeah, next to you.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if the mic right now is working. No. Yeah, because okay, now I can hear myself.
I just wanted to add something, because you were talking, about your role in the community, and I do think that's something that we also discuss a lot with our partners in Belgium. Is the goal is not just to have more diversity, but you are an organization that is in a neighborhood that is at majority Turkish, and you do not see any of that in your programmation at any point, and you don't see any links actually that is done with the communities around you. I'm thinking of a specific place that I used to go, and I always found it very funny. I was sitting in the tram and I could know, oh, these are the people going to that theater, because you do not look like the people around, and you look lost. You look very scared about what's going on around you. And I can see this is your first time in this neighborhood, or not your first time, but you only know the way to that one theater. And the people in those neighborhoods, I would ask them, like, oh, do you know where the theater is? And they don't know, and it's a huge theater. And they have no idea what I'm talking about, because this theater has not been catering anything to them, has been totally separated from its neighborhood. And I do think that Belgium, with its history, with the communities that have been living there for so long, and Africalia, with the link that we have with ex-colonized country by Belgium, such as Burundi and Congo, where we have programs, it makes sense to connect those programs with our partners in Belgium, and to encourage our partners as well to, just step a foot outside your institution and look who are the people around you that are not coming to your theater, and why are they not coming to your theater. I think often we want to go very far. We think like, let's go to Turkey to find something, and we don't look just around us. And what you're saying, like connecting with the schools who are as diverse as your programming, not your programmation, but your residents. I do think that at the core, that is where we can start as a first easy step.
I will, continuing your thought, I will maybe enter with this term of vulnerability, that how to seek for value, and how to think about partnerships and collaboration when one party or one side is vulnerable. Yeah, I pronounce it not correctly.
That's
but
perfect.
Yeah, okay. And how to invent the resource sharing, in this situation. Do you have any ideas for that? And how to really think about this partnership as an equal one?
Yeah. Well, I think maybe Africalia as an NGO, so we receive funding from the federal state for international solidarity, and the way the sector works is that we will find partners and we will send them the money. So we are in a position of power at the start of every collaboration, because we have the financial resources. What we've been trying to do, because Belgium is not ready to send money straight to our partners, what we've been doing is really writing all the programs and all, the whole contract with those partners, which is a very long process that takes us about a year of discussion. But I also I'm the point of contact for the Kenyan and Zimbabwean program, and I am not Kenyan or Zimbabwean, and I've never lived there. It would be very strange for me to write a program about how to support the ecosystem in Kenya and Zimbabwe. I would do it based on what I know, which would be Belgium or Rwanda, and these are very different contexts. What they do have as power is the knowledge of their ecosystem. So the idea is that before we sign anything, and before we sign any contract, before we start any program, we do take a very long time of discussion and exchanges on how are we going to design this partnership, and how do we design it in a way that we are responding to your needs and not just to our vision of what developing an economic sector looks like. Which is slow. I think that's something that maybe we often lack when we are trying to do partnerships, is that we want it to be fast, and we are very enthusiastic and we're very excited, but we do need to take the time to make sure that at every step of the way, I am not just setting the goals of Africalia, because Africalia does have its own strategic vision of where we want to be in 10 years, but that this vision is not the only one represented in the partnership. So it's a very slow process of writing that I am about to start again. So I'm a bit, stressed and traumatized. But it is important that we do it that way, because we will ask for reporting, for example, from those partners. And asking from reporting in exchange for money can very quickly look like we are their boss and that we are deciding what they should do, which is very different if you are the ones who have written what you want to achieve in those 5 years contract. If you have told me that your goal for in 5 years is to be able to produce X amount of movies a year, then my role is just to make sure that you can achieve that through checking your reporting, but also through putting the resources in place for you to do that, not just financially, but just as we were saying, like being able to connect you with the right festivals and being able to connect you with the right trainers and making sure that Wafa is always on call for training. These are things that we can provide, but you have set the terms and the condition of what you think would be your end goal. What do you think, what do you want from us as a partner, like apart from, of course, the money?
So you give more space also
in the
for
decision making. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've been thinking about, because we had some conversation before, and we thought about kind of questions, and I've been thinking about being vulnerable and kind of what that means on sort of lots of different levels, particularly in a kind of residency context. And a lot of the artists that we have come for a residency often haven't been to Europe before, and so there's a kind of there's a sort of vulnerability in terms of the experience. Like, they don't know what's coming. We do try very hard on a kind of very sort of personal, individual level to lay out the terms of the residency, like at every stage. Like, this is a social residency. You're sharing a house with 7 other artists. There's going to be a group program. There's going to be lunches and workshops, and this is not the place to come if you want to go and kind of meditate in nature. There are loads of really amazing residencies that give you that opportunity, and Delfina is not one of them. So we're very kind of clear what the expectations are, and then beyond that, I think like you were saying, that they're setting the terms of their residency. So with every conversation they have with me or with our residency curator or with Aaron, with the director, what do you want to get out of this? What can we do for you? Who would you like to meet? Where would you want to go? What can we help with? What can we facilitate? So as a team, as a staff, we put ourselves in the kind of role of facilitator and mediator, and are very conscious of where there may be power dynamics that would make an individual resident feel uncomfortable, feel vulnerable. So simple things like, on an individual level, if an artist is quite shy, quite introvert, and we have these big lunches and there are 30 people and it's really fun and everyone's having a good time, but maybe they just need to escape, so we'll sit them on the end so they can sneak off. And it's trying to think of those things all the time and sort of protecting them from maybe the demands of the funding partner. That's our job. We literally, physically in our building, the floor for the staff is in between the residency floors and the public floors. We are physically a barrier. And we don't always get it right. And obviously, there are 8 people, there are dynamics within that. Artists compare themselves to other artists. Maybe one artist is, from their perspective, being more successful within the residency space, and we have to try and kind of be aware of that and kind of mitigate that and talk to them about that. So it's vulnerability is a complicated concept, I think, and there's some very kind of clear things around funders and power dynamics, and then there are some in a residency space, in a place where people are living. I walk in the morning and they're there in their pajamas having breakfast. That's a vulnerable position that they're in. So how do I think about that and navigate that and make sure they feel comfortable?
I will just ask you about this dynamic of the residency, because I'm interested in as well. Is it that you are more focused on like personal development of each individual, or if you plan it also as a kind of group process, or is it both?
It's both. It's both. There's always a group program, and some of that is kind of with the staff and you know, that kind of dynamic of a kind of busy kind of cultural space, and some of that is the artists go on trips and visits. They're in Cambridge today, like visiting all the museums together. They have lunch, they go to the pub. You know, there's a group program which is both a kind of professional and personal program, and they can opt in and out. They don't have to do it. It's not obligatory. It's not school. We're not at school. And then there's an individual development program, and I think it's an alternative education program, right? There's no qualification at the end of it. It's all about making connections. It's all about supporting artists to grow in confidence in how they present their work, how they talk about their work, finding opportunities for them. So it's really both. And in some groups, the group program takes on a life of its own, and in some groups, it's much more focused on the individuals, and it really depends.
Before I leave the floor to the audience, but I would like to touch a little bit the political issue and an issue of scarcity, lacking of resources, actually, and I will refer also to the title of this forum, which is Mobility Beyond Internationalization, and but I think that we are also in a very specific moment when this concept is also mixing with the current capitalistic version of it, and where the power relations are really strong. And for example, thinking about this, also the Polish context, where during 8 years we were facing the right-wing government that was ruling, and it was distributing the funds in a very specific way. And of course, it was a relation of power itself, but also for many artists and many professionals, it was a kind of living in a constant scarcity situation, where there was not enough funding or not enough for this kind of work that they would like to develop because of the political reason and because of the kind of specific mindset of closing borders, of being more and more internal, or having this vector that will be focused only on the very local context, and cutting actually the money and the funds for international relations that were described as something that is bringing alien ideas inside the country. So my question would be like, how to seek value of international collaboration in this very difficult political context, or when we are facing, okay, in Poland, we are saying that this ship turned into right direction, but we still have more than 30% of people supporting right wing. We are facing the growing nationalism in many European countries, and in many countries we are waiting actually for the results of elections soon. We are waiting for the situation in USA. So my question would be like, how to look for the value and how to still support international collaboration in this or within these difficulties. Which of you would like to start?
I mean, if we could solve this problem, we could all go home. I mean, there's a similar problem in the UK, and funding for kind of international collaboration, international work, there's much less of it than there used to be. Delfina has never had any kind of public funding on a regular basis, ever. For a long time, our kind of core income was provided by our founder. That's no longer the case and hasn't been for quite a long time. So we raise all our own money every year, and I think, you know, because there was never any public funding really for what we did in the UK, because public funding in the UK is focused on UK-based artists and UK-based audiences, we had to, well, I didn't, but our founding director, Aaron Cesar, had to kind of invent a funding model, and that was about international collaboration. And you know, thinking about what London could offer, and then what the artists could take home with them from that experience. So that's our model, and there are, you know, there are some UK-based organisations and individuals that also value that, and you have to go seek them out. I think, kind of funnily enough, I think that given the political situation in this country, and given the fact that funding for international work has been cut so kind of dramatically, now there are organisations who maybe are kind of thinking that maybe they should probably kind of think about it more, and I think you can make a better and stronger case for it now, based on the political situation, based on the geopolitical situation, based on Brexit, based on all of those things. I think you can make a stronger case for it. But there still aren't a lot of organisations that will give you that money. So we've had to go out far beyond kind of the UK borders, and it's really very nice because you end up working with people who share your values wherever they are in the world, and that's really a great kind of privilege. I'm not sure that answered the question.
Yeah, we've been doing advocacy around this theme forever, and it has been going in two main ways. There is really this question that I was talking about earlier of how do we, on the regional level in Africa, strengthen also those connections, that they are not dependent of a European Union that's going more and more on the right. And I mean, Africalia itself, we are in not a comfortable position because we are an NGO funded by the International Solidarity Department of the Foreign Affairs. And we work on arts, which are not the two subjects that the extreme right loves the most, international solidarity and the arts. This is maybe not the best strategy to keep a job that we've found. But at the end of the day, like we do see that the cultural sector in Belgium sees the value of that. They see in like a very basic way of this is bringing in more people inside of theater and more people inside of museum. So we want to continue developing those international networks. We want to continue having more and more artists coming from abroad. And that is great. And then we are faced with my favorite subject, which is the question of visa. And it is not going to get better. I'm very not optimistic today, but it might get better, but it is not looking great at the moment. And I think the only thing we can do is fight for a better system. I'm thinking especially to all the ones coming from the EU, the Schengen visa process is horrible. And I do think we should fight for and advocate for better processes and more humane processes as well. But at the same time, we, like as Africalia, we do want to see on the African continent more and more of those networks being developed throughout the continent. I often talk about how Africalia brought a lot of our artists in residency from Burundi to Morocco thanks to like a great collaboration with the Hiva Foundation, with Marwan. And that those artists, they had never been to Morocco, and I don't think that they would have thought of going to Visa for Music, even though they are musicians. But by going there, they have created beautiful collaborations that have made it so that their capacity to generate revenues has gotten bigger, and also that their recognition throughout the continent has gotten better. And this is something that we will continue to defend in also through political advocacy for also less visa on the continent itself, but also just roads in between those countries. I'm from Rwanda, and Rwanda doesn't have a great relationship with its neighbors. And last time I was in Rwanda, I naively thought I could go to Kinshasa by flight, and I had to go through Turkey, which is ridiculous. The cheapest way was going through Turkey to go to a country that we just have a small lake in between, well, a big lake, but just a lake in between us. And yesterday I just took a train to come to Wales, and like the UK is not even in the EU anymore, and I was able to take a train after work, and I am here today talking to you, and I did not have to take a visa. This is extremely easy. This now means that I can talk from someone from Poland and maybe do a collaboration later with them. But if you don't have roads in between, like an area of roads, but also just land roads in between those countries, those connections are not possible. So that is also part of the advocacy that we're doing. And I do think that as partners in Europe, that is an advocacy that we can also do from here, supporting more of those airlines traveling throughout Africa, more trains. That is my biggest dream, but I think this is maybe more expensive. More ways to travel from one country to another and make those connections possible, because I don't think the European country can still be such a hopeful place for mobility for African, seeing the political context.
Thank you. I will ask you for comments or questions right now.
Hello, I'm Ruth. I'm here because I'm on the Arts Council of Wales, but my day job, even though I'm a freelancer now, I've been working in the field of disability and deaf arts for over 30 years. I'm self-disclosing as a disabled deaf person. It's fascinating, the conversation, and you asked about the extremism that we're seeing around the world. No more, it's so important that artists now are given the voice, because they can be the ones who can challenge the inequalities we're seeing, etc. But I wanted to pick up on something that was said at the end of the last debate that we had, and that was about privilege, and the fact that it's a privilege to move and to go places. And I'd want to remind you about those people who've not had that kind of sense to develop themselves as artists. They can be outside as artists. I'm thinking particularly about the work I've been doing in disability and deaf arts in lots of different countries, Africa, India, as well as setting up an international festival in Liverpool. But we have the same problem. People wouldn't believe people can be artists if they come from different communities. So we have to challenge those sort of things. So I think when we're talking about privilege, we really need to think about those people who never had a voice in this sort of conversation, who are not seeing the power base suppresses and puts people down. It can be culture, but it can be because people, at some of the countries I've been in, people weren't even allowed in school, even though countries have signed up for the UN Charter for the rights of disabled people. Article 30 talks about the right to a culture and artistic expression, but we're not seeing it happen, and we're not seeing some of these bodies really accept that and start to change the game. And the way we can change the game is by having ourselves reflected throughout society. We need to be able to do that more. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, we have one more comment here on the right side.
Just there.
Thank you, Johan. I will try and stay very brief because I'm speaking tomorrow. I don't want to burn any of my secret cards.
We know we had the same
Yes,
at our
exactly.
previous panels.
But I kind of felt obliged because Wafa mentioned me and then Laura mentioned me. So, hi everyone, my name is Marwan. I run the Hiba Foundation in Morocco. What I wanted to say is quite a strong reflection that I believe in, and it's the way that we work. I think when I reflect on international collaboration, what I think about first is that maybe the conversation is being held only on one part. Maybe we are only thinking about the most powerful and the ones who have the skill set to be shared with the others. But maybe, and I'm just proposing this idea, us on the other side of the Mediterranean, or us on the south, or whatever name we're calling that, maybe we should build ourselves a list of skills and a list of knowledge that we can share with the other side. Maybe we can ourselves stop trying to be like someone else or like another organization, or and maybe start reflecting on what is our context and what do we know how to do better than someone else, or not even in comparison, what do we know how to do, and can we share it with the others in terms of international collaboration. We keep forgetting that collaboration is not unilateral, it's rather collateral or bilateral or trilateral or whatever number we want to put on it. Multi, yes. It's just the stress of everybody looking at me.
It'll be worse tomorrow.
Well, this is my internship. So, yeah, the global idea is that let's really think about international collaboration instead of a direct arrow from one side to another, generally from the north to the south, looking at the planet Earth around as it is. That's my reflection. Thank you.
Thank you. I will follow that, because I think that it's so important that when two different parties meet, it's not only that you present yourself and the others what they have, but that each of us make a space to find or to rework on something that's going to be common for both of us.
Yeah, and I just want to also, because it really resonates what you're saying, and I do think that there is also something very interesting happening when we ignore the global north and that we look for different ways and practices in those countries that we do not explore usually. I think it was in the previous panel that they were talking about the link that could be done, oh yeah, I think it was you, the link that could be done between Central Asia and West Africa, because they've both been on the margin and they've had to develop their own practices. Often I do think that there is their collaboration that can be more equal, because none of the parties come with this idea of, oh, I am the one who knows and you're the one who needs to learn. And that they both have had to create outside of the margin, and really there's something extremely creative that can happen in those collaborations. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that we see this a lot at the foundation because of the groups of residents who are there, who are talking to each other and not to us.
And do you think it's more about equality or equity?
A little philosophy question.
Yeah, I know. To put it at the end, you know.
I don't know.
I think just simply logistically, like as administrators, we try very hard to make it equitable. You know, we pay for all flights, all visas, like, is it always? I couldn't say yes for certain.
Yeah, I think it depends on the context.
Yeah.
I think when we're talking of global north, global south cooperation, there's a real question of equity, way more than equality. But when we think of those south-south collaboration, or south and what is not the north or not the south, I don't know what names we've found for those yet, but that there we can start talking about equality way more than global north, global south, where there is one that is dominant and privileged in any way, in other ways. Yeah.
Any more comments? Yeah, how many do we have? How many comments? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you've got the mic.
Phone. Hello. Thank you very much for this super interesting panel discussion. My name is Judith van der Kooi. I work for Dutch Culture, and I'm also in the board of the Tamimiede Foundation, which is an artist in residency for artists with an African background in Amsterdam. I have a question for Lara. You told several times about exchanges between organizations that you fund. I'm very interested in how these collaborations come about. Is there a network, or is it on demand, or how does it work? And can you give an example?
I think we are very lucky because we're small, so we know all our partners very well. And it's not really a network. I think in Belgium we do have a network of partners, and they meet every 3 to 4 months. In the African countries that we work in each country where there is more than one partner, we will make sure that they also meet quite often, so that they can exchange with each other, and then we will create those connections. I think, but sometimes it also happens a bit by itself. Like recently, I had a partner in Belgium telling me like, "Oh, I met your partner from the DRC, and they do exactly the same thing as us, and we're going to collaborate because it makes sense. I want to learn from their practices because I've been struggling with this very specific thing that, you know, you should just." I don't know, like it's very interesting to see how sometimes this connection can happen, that they say, "Oh, I also work with Africalia." And that will happen very organically, but most of the time we will organize it. We will see a strength that has been developing in one partner and that we want to connect with another, and we will make sure that they meet online or IRL. Yeah.
Maybe here. Yeah.
Thank you. Really interesting panel, and really a lot of thoughts and kind of a lot of things to take in. I don't know if this is a rant or comment or question or something in between. My name is Fadili Magia. I'm Cardiff-based, and I run a small creative agency called Watch Africa. But also I'm a CEO of Sub-Sahara Advisory Panel, which is a network of African communities in Wales. And so my question was really to do with maybe decolonization, or the conversation around decolonization, and maybe not so much to do with privilege. One thought that I had was to do with how mutuality, bilateral conversation we're having right now, and how that is taking shape at this moment in time in the conversation of decolonization. So for example, I've just returned from Uganda, like literally yesterday. And I visited partners there, and I, as you know, Tanzanian-born black person visiting a project, it was the first time almost I'm putting myself in a white person's shoes, in a sense of how the partners within the continent perceive me, conducted themselves around me, and it was a weird kind of situation where I'm kind of questioning, where are we in terms of decolonization? Because we're having this conversation over here, but when you go to the partners within the continent, it feels completely different. You know, I thought personally, because I'm a black person, I'm from Tanzania, fairly local, people will see me differently. But there is those perception of what Laura said. We are the main partners based in the north, so we have the finances. And even though it's not our finances, it's actually someone else's finances, but they don't see it that way. So yeah, it's something there that's missing, and I know we talk a lot about mutuality and bilateral and multilateral, but where do we get, or where do we see ourselves are in this time frame right now in terms of decolonization?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's again about power relation.
Where do we see ourselves in terms of decolonization right now? Is that the? I mean, I find it a very difficult discussion, decolonization, because I'm never sure which definition people are thinking of when they talk about this. And I feel like since 2020 and the BLM movements, a lot of people have taken on those words, and they're often very empty of meanings. So I don't see how you could have a decolonial relationship with a partner in the global south when you have set the terms of this whole relationship, even if you are a black person. If I used to work in a different organization that was more of a traditional NGO working around agriculture and health and those type of things, and I arrived with this mindset of, oh, but I am black and I was not born in Belgium even, and I came as a refugee, so of course if I do something, it will be decolonial, because I am who I am, but I am also someone who has a master's degree from a Belgian university and who is being paid by Belgian institutions. So I come with a set of privileges and power, and also a mentality that is very much impacted by the places I've studied in and the places I've worked at. So of course you are going to feel very like a very privileged person in that context, because I'm guessing you might have kind of the same background as I do, and you arrived at the end of a process. You have to visit a project that where the terms had already been set. I do think that everything starts at the beginning of the collaboration, of how do you start this collaboration, what do you put behind the words partnerships with those individuals, and how do you put this in the framework of the country you are coming from and that you're living in, and those countries in front. I do think that the collaborations that we have with the DRC, with Burundi, with Rwanda, are very different than the ones we've built with Zimbabwe and Kenya, where Belgium doesn't have a colonial history. And that the people that we meet do not have the same expectations of us. So this creates a context that we are operating in that we do not have control over, but that we need to be aware of, and that we need to take into account when we engage in those relations. I don't know if this answers your question, but we're not very far. I'm trying to be optimistic, but it's very hard right now. But we're not very far, but I do think that on a very individual level, on an organizational level, there are ways to create and foster spaces for a more equal partnership. And then we can also, burn governments and start a revolution to do that on a bigger scale. But talking from organization to organization, I do believe that we can create equal or more equal partnership than what we've been doing so far.
Thank you. And I think we have one comment from online, right? No.
Yeah. Is this on? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, hi. Yes, we've had a question from one of our online attendees picking up on your comments around funding. So it's public funding from a UK perspective is very minimal for independent artists, as I'm sure it is for organisations too. I'm an artist in Berlin and Manchester, so I'm fortunate to have links, but the difference between the UK and Germany for funding is incredible. How does the panel feel that a distinct lack of funds will impact the mobility of individual artists, in particular UK artists becoming international collaborators?
I think it's massive. One of the reasons that I left my previous role and I moved to Delfina is because as a funder, in my previous role I was a funder, and my perception was that the funding landscape in the UK was almost entirely institutionally led, driven. Funding was there to support institutional strategy. And like that seemed increasingly mad when all those institutions can't actually survive without artists and artistic practice. And I wanted to go somewhere which was focused on the artists. So I, personally at the moment, I'm very depressed about it. But I hope that, I think people are starting to realise that I think the scales have tipped too far one way. I hope people are starting to realise that.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we have to finish because we are running out of time, and we still have some parts of the program for the late afternoon. I think that we will continue, or I see these links between the first panel and our discussion, and I'm sure that tomorrow it's gonna have its continuation. So please be with us and stay with us tomorrow, from tomorrow morning. And I would like to thank a lot to On The Move, to Johan for having this conversation, and to my guests for their thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Thank
the
you.
moderation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Anna and Laura and Sarah, for proposing so many themes and topics and to leading us to future conversation. As tomorrow we'll have 2 new panels investigating further many of the topics that were brought today. We've reached that moment where the second panel is over. But I know there's a lot of frustration in the room because everybody had questions and comments and wanted to, to share their thoughts. And I'm sure online also people were listening and we were wishing, willing to intervene and to add more remarks. So that's fantastic because the forum continues tomorrow and there will be plenty of time to actually continue this conversation. This is the tricky part of the day where somebody has to to share some takeaways, and this is me. And it is a complicated task because the conversation was so rich. So I just want to pick some of the words that resonated with me personally. So not as an institution, not as a whatever, but really as a cultural professional that I've been around for a couple of decades already. What's fascinating is we started the forum with a lot of keywords that resonated a lot with the early studies and reports that came out on cultural mobility. So I don't know, some of you in the room have old enough maybe to remember the Mobility Matters study. And I remember when we started to work after this great European study, this cornerstone for, on the move and cultural mobility themes, we talked a lot about the motivations to engage internationally. We talked about the prestige, not only to go abroad, but also to come back home. And it was fascinating to hear from Wafa, from Tamara, all these, to use these keywords of, yes, we need international exposure, not just to travel everywhere, but also we need international exposure where we are. Because in the end, and this is something we heard a lot, international is literally next door. And maybe the feeling of isolation is something that was also, discussed, how different international communities actually live side by side, but not really exchange very often, and maybe the international starts from home. What was also very interesting for me is to hear that these trajectories are not straightforward. And what comes to mind when listening to different experiences is that we don't go from point A to point B. The point of departure is quite known. We know that we want to engage internationally, but sometimes we also want to walk away from home, from whatever happens at home. Political distress, and we talked a lot about politics. Maggie Russells and Ellen Hav, we talked a lot about politics today. And we don't always know where we want to land. And the idea of landing is also very interesting. How do we land? Where do we land? And sometimes we land back home from this intense traveling. And I was, very interested by the relocation. How do we relocate ourselves after having an international trajectory? What also came to mind when listening to you is the idea of mandate or mission. Many organizations in the room lead organizations that have a mandate to act internationally, that has a core mission to act internationally. And it feels also very interesting and important that many of the institutions that we mention, the organization that we lead or collaborate with, have this international dimension in their DNA. And we take it for a given. And it's not a given in the end. So I like very much the idea that this is a new gene that we have. And, a special bone will grow out of this gene. I don't know. I like also that we always go back to the basics. Visa issues are still visa issues, and we still continue to address these problems and the powerful passports or the less powerful ones, and the barriers and boundaries that are created, and many of you were talking about this. But beyond these barriers or visa issues, and very sometimes practical issues on crossing borders, having roads and routes and railways to cross borders, there are also the idea of independence, which is something that I find very interesting in the professional development that we try to draw in this physical and virtual room. Independence of the artist or the culture workers to decide what is the landing mark, what is the destination. The idea that many organizations create frameworks or conditions, but don't impose an agenda and try to create the conditions for the artists and the workers to actually decide what they want to learn and how. So the idea of independence of organization in regards to financing, the incomes, well, follow the money, always follow the money. And sometimes it's more run with the money and do whatever you want with these, this funding that we try to catch on our trajectory. And the last point, which I think is also touching or linking many of the ideas that you share today, is the notion of hospitality. How we are hosting, welcoming this international dimension. And this international dimension being really far away from us or literally, next to us, how do we welcome it? How do we take care of this international dimension? Many questions, right? And not yet, the perfect drawing, but we're heading there. So I want to thank you, everybody. Thank everybody, and especially, the translators that were with us, to thank Katie and Marie and Bernardo, who were monitoring all these online exchanges and making sure that the information and translations, etc., were channeled. Again, I want to thank our dear host and especially Warsaw International for, putting all the efforts